interesting experience. For those of you who have all your life traveled to relatives who are fairly close by, travel stress has mostly to do with who you're going to see at what time for what holiday. But for those of us who travel much farther, there are lots of other issues that can become part of the traveling experience. Like the time Sue and I traveled to Allegheny State Park one year to be with family, only to discover halfway across the state that Katie had chicken pox. And that time that the sheriff's deputy stopped by to see what was wrong with our car when our 3-year-old had to just get out and go to the bathroom in the middle of nowhere. And more times than we can count, trying to find a place to get food and a bathroom on Christmas Day in the middle of nowhere as we travel to Rochester and Buffalo to see relatives, as we will do tomorrow afternoon. Not that it's a good thing, but we really do appreciate the fact that shoppers have kind of forced stores to be open on Christmas. Not that I think it's a great idea, but it's so nice to know you can stop somewhere and get a hot coffee at Dunkin' Donuts. So we can in some ways relate to Mary and Joseph as they traveled on their almost 80-mile walking trip from Nazareth to Bethlehem. And no, I'm sorry, but it's very unlikely that Mary rode the donkey. Donkeys in the Middle East were mostly for luggage, a car's trunk, if you will, where you kept your clothes and your water and your food and your outer wraps and the gifts you were obliged to bring to the families that would provide hospitality for you along the way on your trip. And yes, there was family in Bethlehem. We don't know the details much, but Mary's cousin Elizabeth lived up in the hill country above Bethlehem. And Joseph likely had aunts and uncles and cousins, too many to number, that both he and Mary were obligated to see while they were in David's city in their time there. But the city was crowded with lots of folks who were there, so it's very, very unlikely that Mary and Joseph traveled alone. Lots of others were headed back home to see relatives and register for those hated taxes. Besides, no one traveled alone in those days, for fear of being robbed or getting hurt and then being unable to get help. Think of Mary and Joseph as being on an early version of Route 1786, traveling all the way across the state to King David's city, with lots of people walking and lots of whining and crying and talking and kibitzing the whole way. It would have been arduous, but it was doable, because everyone was very used to walking, lots of walking, and because at the other end there would be family and hospitality, and eventually, since by the time Mary arrived in Bethlehem, she was very near delivery, a birth. 2 of the women who were here at 7 o'clock announced that they are due in the next 5 days. We almost had the blessing of a birth in this sanctuary, and neither Nick nor Brian were here, so I don't know what we would have done. In many ways, the story resembles the journey we Farleys and so many other families take each year at Christmas. The planning, the shopping, the choosing, the packing, the grueling journey, all because at the other end there will be rejoicing. People to see and gifts to give and receive, reacquaintances to make, and more than likely, even some chores to do. For Mary and Joseph, there too were people to see, meals to be had, and then that birth. With the arrival of those wild and crazy shepherds with their even wilder and crazy story about angels and songs, and eventually the arrival of grave and wise and dignified magi, visitors from another land and even another region with their story of a star and a portent and a meeting with King Herod of all people, and then a presentation of gifts so valuable that they can scarcely be named, gold and frankincense and myrrh, gifts of immense value, you understand. The gifts also, oddly, not for a child, rather for a king. It was a journey like no other. And soon another trip would be necessary, the trip home. But not for a while, since newborns didn't travel well, and for Mary and Joseph and Jesus, the trip elsewhere first, but that's another story for another time. And just like us, their stay would be too short, and the goodbyes heartfelt but bittersweet. For though we want and need to get home, leaving the folks we love and who have hosted us so well is always hard, especially since we won't see them again nearly soon enough. Christmas is a time of great joys and great fellowship, so I ask you to enjoy it all, revel in it, and remember that long ago it was the same as well. Traveling and packing, gifts given and gifts received, love shared, warm welcomes extended, and even some griefs endured, unexplained. And then came Jesus. Jesus is the reason for our season, the Messiah, the Lord, Emmanuel, the one who makes all of it worthwhile. And all we do this night, all we do in the morrow, is really all about Him. So my friends, enjoy your Merry Christmas. Remember,